In this tutorial, we will try to solve many problems using Python loops. We will use both types of loops, either for or while. Some examples could be solved using either of them. Our first example is a classic loop problem, which is factorial. We will write a program to find the factorial of a number. The number must be a non-negative value. We cannot do factorial for any negative value. If the user enters a negative value, continue asking for a valid value. Your program needs only to proceed further if the user inputs a valid one. Here we are going to write the factorial program. I need the user to tell me the number or give me the number. It must be an integer. So here I'll call it, for example, n is equal integer input non-negative value. Then I need to make sure that the value is non-negative. I can use if for validation, but if will do the validation only once. We will use while for validation. While n is less than 0, which is wrong value or invalid for this example, I can output a message to the user or copy-paste the same message here, put it inside, and just add some new text, wrong value or invalid number, invalid, negative number, again, enter a non-negative value. So the user keeps seeing this message until he enters a valid value. Then you can proceed. So you will not reach line 6 until the user inputs a valid value. Now you need to calculate the factorial. Factorial is integer, and it's going to be product of values like if you enter 5, it's going to be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Factorial is a very, very simple program. It's only multiplying from 1 to n. N is our number. So you can either start multiplying from 1 or from n. You go from 1 to n or n to 1. We will use, let's say, a counter. We'll use a while loop first. I is equal to 1. I need to go from 1 to n. I can write the program like this, while I is less than or equal to n. Now factorial, and factorial now is 1. You know, if it's a sum, we usually start with 0, because with addition, you need to start with 0. But if you are using product, you start with 1. Here I can say factorial is equal to fact times I. So first time it will multiply 1 times 1. Then I increment I. Next time I will be 2. So the result of this at the end, the result of this will be 1 multiplied 2, 3 times 4 until it reaches what? Times n. This is what's going to happen inside this loop. So it will go from 1 to n, and finally you can get the factorial. Print, I can say here n. This is the symbol of factorial in mathematics, and comma fact.
Doctor, I don't get what fact is. Is fact like a variable?
Fact is not a variable, is the result of your program. It's like sum, but here fact must be, you need to initialize it to 1, because what you need is the factorial of n. N is your input. You input a value, here n, like 3 or 4 or 5. We need its factorial. So Factorial of n is a multiplication of numbers from 1 to n.
Okay.
Then now let us try this. Let's try to run this. Now I don't see anything. I need to save. I will run this. Enter a negative value. I entered 5. The first while loop will be ignored because the condition is false. Factorial of 5 is 120. Let me enter another value here, 4. Factorial of 4, 24. Both results are correct. Let us input a negative value and test our validation. I enter -5. It goes inside the validation while loop. I enter another time, negative value, any value that is non-positive is going to be ignored or rejected until you input a valid value.
Yeah, doctor, I don't get it from fact. It's after fact, it's a bit confusing.
You could do factorial using while loop or for loop. You need always to get the number from the user. Your final result is factorial. In order to multiply from 1 to n or n to 1, you need a counter. Your counter, if you use a while loop, could be like this, auto-incremented. If you use a for loop, you need to go from 1 to n plus 1, since the range in while loop stops at n minus 1. So if your range is 5, it's going to go from 0 to 4. So I will try to solve the same example in the next problem using for loop. In this example now, we will do the same factorial question, but using a for loop. We need a range. Our range should start from 1. We cannot start from 0. Otherwise, our multiplication result will be 0. And we need to stop at n. Okay, so let's see how we would do this in a loop. I'm just continuing the same thing for I in, no need for this one now here. For I in a range, your range will be 1, and you will stop at n plus 1. This way, your loop will go from 1 to n times 1. And I would do the same thing here inside it. It's a one-line program now. So now what's going to happen inside the loop, you will start, if you input 5, for example, you will start from 1 and stop at 5. You know, in loops, you stop at n minus 1. So now you stop at what? 5. Every time the value of I will be incremented by 1. So the first round, you're going to get the same result like this one, the one you see here. It will be 1 times 1 times 2, 3, 4, until you reach the value of n. To make a long story short, let's check our value here. Let's run, save, run, enter a negative value. Factorial of 5 is 120. Another time, factorial of 4 is 24. Let us just clean some code here. And I'm using the same code for validation. I just copy paste the same code. -6 is not going to work. -4 is not going to work. If you enter 9, 9 will be accepted, and the factorial is done using a for loop. The thing we did here, we started from 1 to n plus 1. So if you input 5, your loop will go from 1 to 5. And this is what we want. In the previous example here, we used a counter, as the case usually with while loops. And then we will go from I to n, which is 1 to n. But in a while loop, as you know, we need to increment the counter. This way we solve the problem of factorial using 2 different types of loops with validation. In this example, you can ask the user to input 2 values actually, the starting value and ending value of a range. And you need to find the sum of numbers that fall in that range. So in the beginning, you ask the user to enter starting and ending values. Then you calculate the sum of those two values. Let's do this in code. So at the beginning, we need to ask the user to enter a starting value. I can call it start equals integer input enter starting value. Then we can ask him to do ending value. I could call it end and enter the ending value. So your loop is supposed to go from start to end. We would do validation later. Now we need to know the sum. It's very simple. Sum is equal to 0. Then you can do it either with while loop or for loop. If you do it with while loop, you need to use a counter. Okay, like I is equal to 1. You start from 1. And while I made the mistake, I'll explain it now. While I is less than end. Okay, what was my mistake now? Can you tell me? My mistake, I said I is equal to 1, which is wrong. Actually, I should start from the starting value. Yeah, and if you could, if you enter 10 and 20, your counter should start from 10 and stop at 20. Like this now. So now I can say I is equal to start. So if you enter 5 to 30, your I will be 5. So now I'll say sum is equal to sum plus I. And that's it, by the way. We are done. I could say print sum and sum. So if you enter values from 1 to 100, it should go and sum them from 1 to 100. 10 to 20 should go in that range. Let me enter the values first. I save my program. Here's some space here. Run. Enter starting value 10. Enter ending value. I don't see any output. Why? Tell me. I ran into infinite loop. I just need to increment the value of I because the value of I has never been incremented. So the loop condition will forever remain true. I'll go from 1 to 10. Yeah, there was no error in the second iteration. There was no error actually. It was a question of saving a new version. I will run it now again. My starting value is 10. Ending value is 1,000 or 10,000. So this is the sum of values. You can make outputs. Your output looks like sum of values from start to end. End is, for example, equal to sum. So now your output is going to also detail some of the things you did in the code. Enter value 10, 50. Sum of values, it's not saving automatically. Maybe I did something before the tutorial. 10, 50. Yes, sum of values from 10 to 50 is equal to this much. So if I want to do the same thing using for loop, I would just go from start to end plus 1. I would do the same code again using for loop here. I will call it sum using for is equal to 0. So I have two sums. Okay, one is calculated using while, and the other is calculated using for. My for loop will be easier. For x in range from start end plus 1. That's it. So my sum for is equal to sum 4 plus x. So your range, it will do the same thing here. The increment is done automatically. I will output the result now. Sum of values using, here I'll say while loop, and here I would say using for. And make sure I save everything and run this. Run. I can now give 10 and 30. Sum of values using while is this much. Sum of values using for is that much. So this way we solve the same problem using while and for. This code has been done before, only to take one input from the user. If I run this code here, I just need to enter a value in Celsius, like 10, select one of the possible temperature systems like Fahrenheit, and I get the output. It only takes one. Now we need to put this in the form of a loop. So I'll copy paste all the code. I'll take it to another program and I will keep it for later. But what I need to do, I need to put all of this inside the loop. I don't need the comments now. So in the loop, I take input from the user and I then ask the user whether he wants to continue or not after I finish. All these steps will be repeated again and again if the user wishes to do so. The program at the end needs some kind of a counter telling how many times you accepted values. If you need a counter, usually you initialize the counter to 0 somewhere. One more thing. Once you finish, you need to ask the user whether he wants to continue, yes or no. And this is going to be a variable. If it's going to be yes or no, it's going to be a string. Let me just give it a name, like again. And I'll assume again is Y. Yes. So now here, again is initially Y. I'll make a loop. While, see the condition is very simple. While again is equal Y. We will modify this in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Now, all of these things will be part of the loop. That's it. Now, as long as again is Y, you will ask the user to input and give a choice and produce the result. Tamam? Once he finishes with 1, you need to ask him whether he wants to continue, yes or no. So we'll take a new value for again. If the value is yes, then we continue. Otherwise, we quit. So let's see how we're going to do it. I would say again is equal to input, it's a string. Continue, for example. And I could say like this, Y or yes, no. Okay. And that's it. Now, you will see this question at the end. If you input Y and you come back, this is true. So you go inside again. Once you finish another time, you will be asked the same question at the bottom of the loop. Continue, yes, no. You enter Y again, it will come back. So you will keep repeating this until you enter something other than Y. You know, if you enter small y or capital Y, this is a different case. So you know you can add here or again is equal caps Y. So now whether you enter small case Y or caps letter Y, the program continues. By the way, we are done. I just need to add one more thing here. I need to say count is equal to count plus 1. So every time you go inside the loop, you will increment the value of the count. So when you come out of the loop, we know how many times you were inside the loop. We are not taking any average or sum here, but we will do this in another example. So this way, this type of loops is called yes/no loops. You ask the user every time he finishes. So now at the end, I would say print, you entered, for example, count values. So once you finish, this is outside the loop. So here we ask the user whether he wants to continue. This is the only new thing. We use the variable called again. Our loop continuation condition is as long as again is y. We copy pasted the same code from a previous example. We just now increment the counter and request his choice, yes or no. So since this is a long one, let me run this. Okay, enter. Okay, this is our first time, 10. I want 10 to be Fahrenheit. Continue. This is the new thing. I input y. It went again inside the loop. I entered 50. Okay, now Kelvin. Continue. Yes. I enter another value. I enter Rankine. Continue. Yes. I enter another value. I enter Rankine again. Now, khalas, I don't want to continue. I input n. Anything actually, anything other than y will be wrong because the continuation condition becomes false. You entered the loop 4 times. So what I did in this code, I got this sequential code, not really sequential because there is if statement in it. So with some branching, and then put all of this code inside the loop. This is a good technique when you have a complicated problem. You solve it for one transaction or one value first, then you design your loop. You could use the same thing here, the same code inside different types of loops. So we initialize the counter. The value that is going to decide whether we continue or not, it's a yes/no loop where you ask the user at the end. We incremented the counter whenever the user accepted a new value. At the end of the loop, we know how many times it was used. That's it. This time we are going to write a program that finds whether a number is a prime number or not. A prime number is a number that is divisible by only itself and 1. If it's divisible by any other value like 2, 3, 4, then it's not a prime number. When you get a value like 10, you try to divide it by 2. If it's divisible by 2, then it's not a prime number. No need to continue. If you get 11, you try by 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not divisible by either of them. No need to continue after 5 actually, because any number is not divisible by any value greater than its half. So if you get 20 or 27, and 27 is divisible by 3, but if it's not, no need to continue dividing the number, testing until you reach the half. So the first thing we will ask the user to enter a value, which is n, and that n is going to be an integer, and we'll ask the user, please input a non-negative value. Now we can do validation later. Input, enter, non-negative value. Okay, we will assume the value is non-negative. Now we will assume the number is prime. This is one way of solving the program. Look at this. We call it flag. I will say is prime. This is a name of a variable. Equals true. Yani here I'm telling that the number is prime. How do you know it's prime? I don't know, but I assume it's prime. How are we going to test if it's prime or not? I will go inside the loop now. If I can divide it by any number, I'll make this value false. If I can divide it by any number, I'll make this value false. طيب. If the user enters n, where should you go from? You can go from 2. No need, okay, you will not divide by 1 because all numbers are divided by 1. You can say for x in range, for x in range 2 to n. No need actually to go to n, but we will later divide it by 2. What you're going to check here inside x? يعني, let's imagine it for a minute. The user inputs 10. I need to go and see if it's divisible by any value from 2 to 10. And it will be divisible by 2. If it's divisible by 2, then I need to set the value of the Boolean is prime to false. Since it's now خلاص has been found not a prime number. See what we do inside here. If n modulus x is equal 0, then no remainder, right? No remainder means it's divisible. If it's divisible, then I would say is prime equals false. If it's prime is equal false. I will solve this program in more steps. Yeah. Print, this is not a complete program, it's not accurate. Print, now, how I know if the value is prime or not? After the loop, I would know this. After I finish all the possible values, I can know this. I can print a simple message. I can print a simple message like n, then I can say prime and give a question mark like this, and then tell you what is prime. So if is prime remains true, then it was found not to be indivisible by any value. If it's false, after you come out of the loop, if it's false, no, the number is not a prime because at some value it was divisible. So here your output, let us see first. Our program still is, contains some bugs. Let's clear here everything, save, and run. Enter a non-negative value, 10. 10 is prime? No, false. Let's try another one. Why it was false? Because when it started dividing 10 by 2, it was found what? 0. Alas, then it's not a prime. Let's try another one now. 11. 11. 11 prime, true. Why it's true? Simply because it tried to divide 11 by 2, it didn't work. Then over 3 doesn't work. By 4, by 5, by 6, by 7, it doesn't work. So it was found indivisible by all these values. Then the original value of this flag, of this variable, remained true. After the loop, we still find it, the is prime, we still find it true. Does that make sense? We still find it true, then it's true. Now, in our loop, no need to go to n. And if you enter 11, no need to go to 11 to try to divide a number from 1 to 10. Because actually, if you divide it by itself, which is 11 here, 11 is divisible. And now you will get a wrong answer. Because at the last point, you will try to divide 11 by 11, which is fine. Here, if I enter 11 now, prime, let me just save now. Okay. If I enter 11, it is telling us that is not prime. I know 11 is prime, but there was some logic error here. You are dividing the number by itself. So this is wrong. So where should I stop? At half of n. If you input 70, it's enough to stop at 35. So how to get half of the number? Just divide it by 2? No. Because dividing the number by 2 may generate what? a float. And if you divide 9 by 2, you get 4.5, which is a problem in some cases, right? And it will generate. How you get the integer value? And integer division by 2. So if you enter 11, integer division by 2 is 5. If you enter 37, you get 18. Does that make sense, ya shabab? So now your program is almost ready. It goes from 2 to there, half of the value. If it's at any moment found to be what? Divisible, then we set this flag to false. You will later, ya shabab, you will later study in functions how to, if you find this value divisible once, no need to continue. Our program now is not a very good program, because even after we find the number divisible, we continue. There are techniques how to return and break, and no, don't worry about them now. We are just trying to learn loops. 37 is a prime value. I know that. So now it was not saving. I'll change the setting right after this tutorial to be what autosave when I run. Tamam. So now here we solve the problem of a prime number. Maybe this is not the best solution in the world, but at least at this stage it's working. Let us change this output. We can use if statement here. If is prime, but what to do? Print n is a prime number. Good. Else n is a prime number. I just need to use single quote. Else, it's either or, right? Else print n is not a prime number. N is not a prime number. You know, the prime value is either true or false, right? It's either true or false. No need to say if is prime equal to true or if is prime equals to false. No, it by itself is either true or false. So this is the final version, let us say, of our code here with the save before we run. Okay. And then I run the program one last time. 11 is a prime number. I run it with another one like 87. 87 is not a prime number, and that's how we do a prime number. Electricity bill, but now using loop. We did this before for one bill only. If you enter number of units consumed, like kilowatts or whatever, then you calculate how much money, and it's in categories like no money for the first 100, then 5 reals for the second one, then 10 reals. We did this logic before, and it's available in our code. But now we need to put this in a loop. We will not take the input only for one customer. We will keep accepting new values until a negative value is entered. Now this is our loop. Until a negative value is entered. You know that number of units cannot be negative unless you sell to the government. And by the way, in many countries you can, if you use renewable technologies. Finally, print the total number of units and average charge. We need to take care of this. If I tell you total, it's easy. If I tell you average means you need to know how many values were accepted. So this type of loops is going to continue as long as the value of units, it's not negative. And in many examples, we said this is going to be what? This is going to be Sentinel-based loops. And there are techniques we learned in Sentinel-based loops. So let's go to the code and see previously, the code we did previously, and then the new code. This is the code we did before to test the charge according to the giving formula here. If you consume 300, you pay 1,500, simply because you pay 500 for the second 100 and 1,000 for the third 100. So our code is fine and was explained before. I'll take all of this code now and I will go to our next example here. I'll copy paste everything. And now, before we start writing the code, we need to put it inside the loop first. So we need to design the loop. This type of loop is called a sentinel-based loop. It's a loop that continues until you input a certain value. It could be a value or a range of values. In this example, we told you to stop if the user inputs a negative value. For sentinel-based loops, in general, what you do, step number 1, take one value before the loop. So we will take the number of units before the loop here. We will keep this code. Step number 2, it depends. Set your counters if you have counters. If you need them. Yeah, I need counters, by the way. Count is equal to 0. And the question says, give me the total of all bills. So I would say the grand total is equal to 0 now. So now I'm good with that. No need to initialize any other thing. Now design your loop condition. What's my loop condition? My loop condition will be while units is greater than or equal to 0. So this way, you will not accept any negative unit. This is my loop continuation condition. Then I can say in step number 3, design your condition carefully. Make sure it's right and it does not contradict with any of the possible values of the problem. Now I will take everything from here, everything, and press tab. That's it. I'm not 1,000,000% done, but I know what this code's going to do, starting from this F to the end here. However, now I'll just give you the technique, okay? Step number 4, process your input. Process your input depends on the example. Process your input. Here you will find how much money the customer is going to pay. All these things are processed. That's fine. Then I need to, finally, I can increment the counter here. Counter is needed now. Counter is equal to count plus 1. And once I calculate how much money, the bill amount, is it a good idea to, at the very end here, after each transaction, to say bill amount, or sorry, grand total is equal to grand total plus bill amount. So you added the bill of this guy to the grand total and you processed. This way you processed all the things. You told the customer how much money he needs to pay and you incremented the counter and you added the current sum to the grand total. Next step is to ask the user to input the value. So the last step in the loop, actually, the last step in the loop here, step number 5, let me say, request the next value in the last step of the loop. In the last step of the loop, request the next value. This technique is very useful. No matter how your example is, if it's a Sentinel-based loop, it will always work. Take one value before the loop, set your counters, design your condition carefully, process your input. This depends on the example. In the last step of your loop, request the next value. By the way, we are done now. We have a very nice thing here, and I'll show you how this thing is going to work now. I can print, okay, you entered, then I could say count, bills, bill amounts, tamam, okay, طيب, done, good. What else? The grand total is, now you know the average, right? Do I have to explain why you know the average? Which is grand total divided by what? By count. Tamam. Then I can say now grand average is equal to that much, and grand total and the average. Okay. Grand total of the money today made, of money made today. Okay. it will just what here, just a grand total. And since we said reals, I could say here, okay, I could format this, but no time. And the average would be done the same way here. Average bill amount. Average bill amount is equal to that much. Okay, here's the average. So now what's going to happen inside the loop? First, you enter the first customer. If it's valid value, it will go inside. Process the customer, calculate everything, add it to the grand total, increment the counter, then ask you for the next value. You enter a positive value again, non-negative value at least. Then it goes back to the loop. Is it valid? Yes. They go inside. You keep going inside as long as you enter a non-negative value. This is our loop continuation condition. You just need to enter a non-negative value. So this loop would work indefinitely if you keep inputting non-negative value. Once you finish and you are done, you just input the value that makes the loop terminate, which we called in our classes Sentinel-based loops. So maybe the first time you run it 10 times, maybe 30 times, 50 times, you decide. The moment you enter the Sentinel value, the loop terminates. Let's run this and hopefully things work. It's a big code, a bit, yani, for the screen at least. Okay, enter a number. Where is it? Here, let me close everything. Let me make sure, okay. Clear everything. I need first thing to save. And now run. How many units consumed? First customer, he consumed 70 units. So the bill amount is 0. Perfect. Now, the first amount was accepted in line 2. The loop condition in line 7 was accepted. It went inside the loop. It calculated everything. And then at line 23, they ask you for the next value. And now I am entering the next value, 150. Bill amount is 250. It went back to the top of the loop, validated, processed, and now you enter a new value, 300, 700, 245, 109. And khalas, I am done. I don't have any more customers now.
Okay.
Just input any negative value. That's it. Grand total of money made today. Sorry, you entered 6 bill amounts. Grand total of money made today is this much. Average bill amount is that much. Does that make sense now? We cannot, if you want the total number of units, made, you just set it in the counters here. I can say total units, and this is going to be 0 in the beginning. It will be part of the processing. Here you will say total units is equal to total units plus units entered for this customer. And we can add this here in the, okay. Let me just do it here. Print total number of units consumed, number of units consumed is equal to what? Total units here. And let me say here, I'm not sure if it's kilowatts or not, but let us assume I'm right, yani. Kilowatts or whatever. So now I will run this one more time, and I will run it with a caveat next time, like with a trick. How many units consumed? 100, 900, or whatever values I'm entering now. Everything is working fine. It calculates and add them to the final price. And now I will enter any negative value. I get you entered 11 bills. Grand total. I just forgot to save the last one. And I will run it only twice now. I did not save the latest changes on the grand total of units. So here what I'm going to do is just do something quick. Okay, -1. So total number of units consumed is 2,000, and grand total is made is like that. So whatever values you see here, actually, the first time we work on this, it was without a loop. Then we said you need to put this in a type of Sentinel-based loop. Sentinel-based loop is not the loop where you ask the user whether he wants to continue or no. You just tell him, if you don't want to continue, give me that type of the loop. There are 5 steps how to work with Sentinel-based loops. Explained already in the class, but however, the technique should work with no matter how your example is. Take one value before the loop, set the counters, design your condition, process, and at the very, very last step, go ahead and request a new value from the user. This program will make an error if you enter no values. Like here, when I run the program at the very first time here, I am at line 2. I enter the negative value at line 2. At line 2, I'm entering a negative value. So what's going to happen? It will not go inside the loop 0 times. See? You entered 0 bill amounts. But here I get an error. This error actually at the line where I try to calculate the average. Because at the line where I try to calculate the average, I am dividing a 0 by a 0, which is what? Infinity. You know that. You cannot do this. So at this line, you cannot do division unless what? Unless what? The user inputs some valid amounts. Yani if the very first time, like again now, I will run it. If the very first time, for example, the user ran this and then he entered the negative value, you get some kind of an error. Let me just show you how you take care of this. How you take care of this. All this work can be done only if you have valid values. See? Now I'm going to have another if statement after the loop. If count is greater than 0, if count is greater than 0, means what? The user did input at least one valid unit amount, right? So if count is greater than 0, do all of this. Only if count is greater than 0. Else means count is still 0. What does that mean? 0 valid amounts were entered. So here I can tell the user some kind of a message. I will just tell him 0 valid values accepted. Or no need for 0. No. Valid values accepted. Yani no need, just to tell him no valid values accepted. Accepted. That's it. Now, if the user, even after the loop, if the user entered at least one, it will be taken care of here. Otherwise, we will tell him, you have not used our excellent application. Does that make sense? So I run this now. How many units consumed? -5. No valid values accepted. So now, -5 at line 2, as a result of this, the loop, the entire loop at line 8 was kept, and you reach at line 28. At line 28, this value was still 0, so the entire true block was skipped, and we went to the else part. However, if you try to use our program, okay, I can run this now, 1,567, any number of values here, that's fine, okay? And at the end, if you want to just finish, just input any negative value. You get the total of accepted bills, number of units consumed. I can add a D here. Okay. And grand total and all that.